An art form that's missing in most of our culture today is the ability for a group of people to gather together for impacting and meaningful conversation. Conversations where we talk about our hopes, our dreams, our fears, our failures, and maybe even our issues. Throughout my entire life, it was the people that made safety a priority. Those people that allowed me to be me, that helped these conversations to be life-changing. We invite you to kick back, relax, and just hang.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Just Hang. I'm your host, Jake Gibson, also known as Pastor Jake Gibson. Today, we have two familiar faces joining us on Just Hang, the dashingly handsome hosts of What the Flock podcast, Pastor Jonathan Freese and Pastor Joel Swakowski. Welcome, pastors, to Just Hang.
Thank you.
Hey, how's it going?
Good to have you guys along. So, you guys just wrapped up your third season of What the Flock, and all signs point to the fact that it is a smashing success.
Yeah, thank you. I agree.
Any favorite moments from either of you from your season 3 experience?
I mean, it's got to be Pastor Rich, right?
Oh, okay. All right.
Pastor Rich calling in.
I'd love to hear more.
Finale.
Yeah,
I'm sure you would.
That was a bit.
I'm sure you would love to hear more.
That was a big moment. You know, I think I even think that specific episode was posted on July 4th, Monday, July 4th. Talk about some fireworks, huh?
Oh, right.
Jeez. Yeah.
Honestly,
yeah.
It's been funny because I feel like people are they're seemingly just as angry with us as they are excited because of the cliffhanger and people just wanting more. There's so much frustrated, like, give us more. But that was, I mean, a highlight. I love the episodes you're covering today. I think we hit some of my favorite topics we covered this. Then, of course, the Pastor Rich call was just spectacular.
Jonathan, how about you? Any favorite moments from season 3?
I mean, moments, just the Music of Life Church podcast, man. I keep saying this in every interview, but I'm gotta promote that podcast because
Right.
it's just been fire. You know, like, we're learning stuff in the moment. We're having a great time. We're getting, more relaxed. But yeah, I mean, Pastor Rich calling in is it's hard to beat that moment.
Oh man, yeah, incredible. Yeah.
I really, really like that Pastor Jonathan continues to emphasize the Music Life Church podcast, because still, I think this is still a problem, is I think a lot of people aren't actually aware that they are different podcasts. The What the Flock podcast and the Music Life Church podcast are not the same. We talk about the same topics, but they are worth listening to both. But it's actually pretty amazing how many more listeners we have of What the Flock than we do the Mulk podcast. But Pastor Jonathan also spreads his wings pretty wide in the Mulk podcast too. So it's a lot of fun to have him be, talking about as much as I do.
And really, both of those podcasts kind of have two different aims, right? Why don't you talk a little bit about the aims within each of those podcasts?
Yeah, So the What the Flock podcast is for people who've been hurt by church. We present the ultimate answer. So it's not the strict side of the perspective. It's not the loose side of the perspective. And that's what happens, is that there's a topic that causes disunity in the church, and two sides form. And so what we do in What the Flock is we present the answer that is neither of those things, but has both of the elements of those pieces. And we also, we get a caller. So it's definitely an experience, but it's for people who've been hurt by church. And then the Music of Life Church podcast is for the people who want to help those people who've been hurt by church. So Essentially what it is we replicate what it is that Pastor Joel and I are doing. Like, how do we approach this topic, and what are some auxiliary doctrine, or what are some auxiliary topics that we can bring in to support what it is that we're learning and talking about? So the Music of Life Church podcast is very free form. The structure, there's not a whole lot of structure. It's essentially I teach and Joel teaches, whereas in What the Flock, where I'm looking for Joel to teach. Like, we're, there's definitely more of a script that we're following that we want to hit in order to present the ultimate answer. Whereas the Music of Life Church podcast is like, hey, what would it be like to go out to eat with Pastor Joel and Pastor Jonathan and talk about this specific topic? Well, we would both be talking. I would have lots to say about every topic if we were grabbing a bite, as I believe when we are just hanging, Pastor Jake.
Right.
Nice.
Both of us have lots to say about the topics.
So for instance, Pastor Jonathan may ask me, like, if I'm doing an episode on doctrine, instead of us just presenting the topic of doctrine, the opposing sides, the ultimate answer, helping everybody understand it, the Mulk podcast, Pastor Jonathan asking me, how do you determine doctrine? Or me asking him, when we're dealing with thought process issues, Pastor Jonathan, how do you help somebody who's dealing with anxiety or panic attacks? So it's more like, that's what we would like replicating ourselves, is more like, how have you grown in this specific area? And we're sharing a lot. I think a lot of the cool part and why it's more personal is because we are sharing more personal experiences in the Mulk podcast. But yeah, I enjoy them both, but I definitely like to see Jonathan, be able to run a little faster on the Mulk podcast. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's kind of like What the Flock's a show, and Music of Life Church podcast is hanging out. It's just talking. Nice. That's a really quick way to distill the difference.
Oh, that's a great picture too of the Music of Life Church podcast really being this, we are just hanging out, we're grabbing a bite, and it's just free flowing conversation back and forth. That's awesome. That's cool. Well, the 3 specific episodes that we're going to be focusing in on today are the Laborers, the Doctrine episode, and Discipleship. Now, Laborers, that happened early in season 3. And the Doctrine and Discipleship really kind of happened towards the end. Actually, the last 2 episodes. And really, these topics are really interconnected, right? Can you help us understand a little bit more about why you paired these 3 topics together to talk about today on Just Hang?
Yeah, I think the Laborers fit the arc of the season closer to the earlier parts, because we were talking primarily on witnessing and evangelism and these specific roles that we do have within the body of Christ, and laborers would be one of them. But laborers at the core fit so well with the doctrine and discipleship because of the necessity of both of those things as it relates to a laborer. A laborer is more than just somebody who's going to do the work of witnessing or evangelizing. A laborer is somebody who's going to have good doctrine, and is really discipleship being the ministry of the church, not just a ministry, is going to be all encompassing as it relates to all of these different things. So I just saw the work that goes into, laborers are called that because they toil. It is work. It's hard work. Right. And in order to be a successful laborer, your doctrine's got to be right. And the ultimate goal is really discipleship. It's about replication. So that's where I see that it's almost like they should have been closer together, those 3 episodes in the arc of the season, but there was definitely a good reason why this role was earlier, the role of laborer. But the ultimate thing we got to with everything in this season, with what do we ends with discipleship.
Nice. Yeah, and that's actually one of the things that I have here in my notes from what I took away from these 3 episodes and really how they're connected is laborers need God's doctrine in order to facilitate discipleship.
Yeah.
Pastor Jonathan, what would you say about that?
Oh, I think that's a perfect answer. I think that the reason why we're not successful in terms of discipleship is because I think there's people that don't want to do the work. And then the people that want to do the work don't have the tools to do the work.
Oh, nice.
And
Oh,
I
nice.
think,
Nice.
and I think that in discipleship is such a big and humongous topic that I think everyone probably lumps those three things into getting people saved. You know, like what is, you know, what does it mean to be a laborer? It means to get people saved. What does it mean to be a disciple? It means to get people saved. What does doctrine mean? You know, doctrine is Jesus.
Yeah.
And they all kind of get
message.
exactly, and they all kind of get lumped together, like, and
Witnessing
we don't see progress. Yeah.
I mean, even the harvest is plentiful, the laborers are few. What's the move most pastors are teaching people to do in response to that verse is go out and get people saved.
Bingo.
So that's why we have to have those roles, witnessing, evangelism, laborers right next to each other in the arc of the season. But where this all ends is there is something way bigger and way deeper going on that is closer to God's heart than just salvation.
Right. One of the things that you mentioned specifically in the laborers episode is really this aspect of mental health. And really a laborer is somebody is trying to help improve the mental health of somebody. And how would you say that the church maybe is getting that wrong now? Obviously, discipleship is a big focus right now, and it's a big movement really in trying to get people built up, or the church's intention is great, but where do you see the church missing as it's related to these three aspects of laborers, doctrine, and discipleship?
Well, with mental health in particular, I think because the church has failed so miserably at this, the response has been to ignore it and rationalize it away as if it's humanism or psychology. So I actually look up to the churches who go head first directly into talking about mental health, talking about thought process, talking about these issues that we have in the brain God gave us, because and unfortunately a lot of the churches that do so still don't have the right answers. But even just having the courage to go after these topics immediately puts you on this in this category of churches that is going to be looked at by a large majority of Christians as people who are just being humanists or like honestly, Jake, I get so frustrated when I hear Christians, especially leaders or pastors, accuse us of being too psychological or of being too focused on self-help and all this stuff. And unfortunately, what these people are doing is they're putting themselves in this corner of, okay, then you can never intentionally try to help somebody change their behavior. So it's all this psychology, self-help, mental health is really the unifying goal of all of those things is to try to help people have a behavioral change. Now, most, in my experience, are failing at that, and they aren't getting to the ultimate answer like the podcasts are presenting. But the church is just failing so miserably in so many areas that in order to try to make ourselves look better, we just, you know what? No, none of that is biblical. None of that is biblical. That's all humanism. So that's where I get frustrated, where mental health, I mean, really is one of the biggest responsibilities of the church.
And that's the perfect answer. I think that how would the church respond to mental health? They would say it's not our responsibility. And what are we judging? What should we judge the mental health of a church based upon? Is how the pastor's mental health is. Like, and I don't mean like, is this church judging, meaning, is this church worth anything or not? What I mean is to look at the church and say, is this a mentally healthy church? Is
Nice.
this to look at the pastor and basically say, is that a mentally healthy pastor? because what he's doing up there is he's helping everyone have his or her thought process. So they are, I mean, if we are dealing with words that are spiritual, and spiritual is the cause, then emotions and mental and physical are going to be the result. So if you deal in spiritual work, there is even a greater impact mentally and emotionally and physically in people's lives, because God is a spirit and he's impacting our life way more than, physical things.
Oh yeah.
He's doing way bigger work in our lives being spiritual, than we can impact other people's lives being physical. So that's what I think, Jake. I think it's pretty sad if we were to look at the church based upon the health of the pastors. And even one step further is the pastor and their family.
Yeah.
So are you saying then the average, common church attender or church member, if they were to take this look at their pastor and they're seeing their pastor dealing with physical ailments, he's dealing with mental stress, he's dealing with, emotional issues, then it may be an indicator that his mental health isn't great?
I would say that if he's dealing with those things poorly, if the effects of him dealing with emotional, mental, physical issues, if they are going to impact the church,
right?
They will impact the church. So if he's handling those poorly and he's not making progress in those 3 areas, it's declining. The whole church is going to decline with that pastor as he declines.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this reminds me of something. I was blessed to be able to be the officiant at Pastor Jonathan and his wife, Overseer Morgan's wedding. And one of the things that I was able to say over them was, I'm excited for you two to get married so that because I look at your marriage as a marriage where you'll be able to say to people, I want you to have the marriage that me and Morgan have. I want Jonathan to be able to say that. And I believe he can say that because he has a really good marriage. Not like what a lot of people say. A lot of people who are married will say, I want you to have a better marriage than me.
Oh, yeah.
And the response to that is, well, why don't you have a better marriage? Why don't you have the marriage that you want other people to have? And isn't it kind of are you holding us to a higher standard than yourself by saying you wish this for us, but not for yourself? Well, anyways, what am I getting at with that? It's like the same thing with a pastor over his church. He may be able to say to his congregation, I want you to have a better mental health life, a better mental life, better emotional life, better physical life, better spiritual life than me. And that sounds so great, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But why don't you, pastor? Why don't you have a better mental life, better emotional life, physical life, spiritual life? And who are you then if you don't, to hold us to a standard higher than yourself? But the point is I can't give something to somebody I don't have myself. So it's wishful thinking for this pastor to say, I want you to have a better mental health life than I do if he has a crappy mental health life. It's wishful thinking. It's flattering words. It sounds nice, but it's deception. It's like, and what the student's not above his teacher, right? What that means is I'll only be able to rise to the level that my teachers are able to teach me. That's why it's good to have all these different people in my life with different strengths poured into my life, because as a teacher, I can only get you up to the level I am at. I can't get you higher than where I am. If so, the areas I'm getting you higher than me in are areas where I'm in danger of hypocrisy.
Wow.
So that's the same thing that's happening when we hear these really nice words from these older married couples who are saying, I want you to have a better marriage than me. Or these pastors who have depression, anxiety, and it's crippling them and distracting them from the word of God to the point where they wake up on a Sunday morning and have to call somebody else to preach that day because they can't get out of bed. But this person wishes you to have a better mental life than them. That sounds so great, but it's deception and it's borderline hypocrisy.
Wow.
It all comes down to how do we handle these. So I like what Pastor Jonathan did. If we handle these mental, emotional, and spiritual issues poorly, because we all have issues mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. But what God looks at is how do we respond to those things? And if I'm responding to those things by rationalizing away why it's okay for me to have those issues and wishing for you that you never have to have these issues, well, I'm being a hypocrite.
Yeah, so it was cool. I mean, Paul says, as I follow Christ, follow me. Like that those were Paul's words. Yeah. And the thing, it's not more than I do. It's right. As I do. Mm-hmm. Follow my example. And so to get super practical here, if your pastor is depressed and sad and sick all the time, if you follow all of his words, you will be depressed, sad, and sick.
Wow.
That's how this works. And then the flip side is true. If your pastor is filled with joy, if he is, if they are happy, if they are, well and sleeping great at night, if you follow them, you will have all of those things.
Yeah. So our thought processes naturally sync up to one another. So when we are around each other, when I'm around another person, I will either become more like them or they will become more like me. So the only way for me to maintain a healthy thought life when I'm with other people is for them to either have a better thought process than me to bring me up, or for me to be in a position where I am helping them in some way. Wow. It's the only way to protect myself when I'm around people who have a worse thought process than me is if I am being intentional about helping them. But yeah, this is replication. We do sync up to one another. So that's why I really like Pastor Jonathan's answer of look at your pastor, look at your leaders, because as they are, if you follow them, it's cause and effect. You will end up becoming like that.
And it sounds a lot about, one of the things that Jesus was so passionate about, this idea of sowing and reaping.
Yeah.
Nice. So in your experience, what do you see when people, for example, someone that is passionate about fixing somebody's thought process, right? They go, yep, I want to be a laborer. I want to fix somebody's thought process. They know that discipleship is this unique replication process, but they still have the wrong doctrine. In that equation, what do you typically see happening in those scenarios?
I mean, it would be like the Apostle Paul when he was still Saul, sowing into and investing into other people they would just turn into Pharisees as well. So that's what it looks like. Because Paul, the reason I use him is because his intentions were pure. He was ignorant of his unbelief. He was doing what he thought God wanted him to do. And we would say the same thing about your scenario here. We're talking about people who have the good intentions of being a laborer, of doing the hard work, of toiling with works of words as a teacher, of trying to help these people have a better mental and emotional life, have better doctrine, and to be more connected with their community. But if they're teaching the wrong stuff, it's going to hurt the people that they're trying to help. So that's what we see. And that's what we see a lot. What we see more often than not, Pastor Jake, is pastors who have the best intentions in the world. And they're just teaching the wrong information, which is hurting people. And where we really find out what these pastors are made of is when they're confronted in these areas, if they rationalize away the damage they're causing by pointing to the good intentions they have. That happens a lot, unfortunately.
Yeah, I would say two things. One is it's just there's no power. We don't see any progress.
Nice.
In that church and in that pastor's life or whatever. And then as good as it gets, I would say, is after years and years and years and years of toil and work and experience, there is the most minuscule amount of progress. And then they go, this is what following the Lord is like. Is just, we made this much. And doesn't that sound exciting, Pastor Jake? Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that such great news to make this much progress through your whole life and to sit back and go, did I really do any good? Well, and you got to really sit there and do a lot of work to say, maybe I helped this person or maybe I helped that person. And I think it's sad.
Is that the whole notion and idea that comes to light when this cliche Christian phrase, like if just one person finds the Lord, it was all worth it. Maybe that's where that comes from.
I think so. But and I'm cool with that. I'm cool with that phrase as long as it doesn't also mean at the expense of the other however many.
Right.
But what I hear, and in line with the discipleship topic, with what Pastor Jonathan said, if all that work, all that toil happens and results in just minuscule amounts of growth and progress, and none of that understanding or none of that experience is turned into understanding, then what you've replicated is the next generation having to go through the exact same garbage you went through.
Yes.
Or even if I could turn that little bit into understanding, then that's a little bit less.
I could
garbage.
use that. Yeah. Right. That would widen it. If you can give me that, then that's a little bit more than all of the work that you did.
Yeah. And that's a big passion Pastor Jonathan and I have. And you know this firsthand, Pastor Jake. We use the term, we bleed over this stuff. We've bled over a lot of things to get our church founded on the doctrine of God, founded on God's, the apostles' doctrine, breaking of bread, fellowship, and prayer, founded on the pillars of what the church is meant to be. And it took a lot of work for us to be the state of health that we're at now. And what we want to do is offer what we've learned and what we've bled over to other churches, so you don't have to go through what we went through in order to have the same level of health in your church as we do today.
Wow. Is that really the overall goal and aim of these two podcasts, is to share with people the things that you've bled over so that they don't have to bleed over those same things?
Absolutely.
Great.
That's a great way to say it.
That's a great way to say it. Yeah, buddy.
And that's why another reason why Pastor Jonathan and I are so quick to share our failures as much as we are our successes, maybe more so our failures, because of how much we can learn through those, and how, it's kind of this parental desire we have to have our kids or our, the sheep God's put in our care learn from our mistakes. What's that mean, to learn from my mistakes? Is if you take and learn through understanding what I had to learn through experience, it won't be as painful for you.
Yeah. And if the best you have is don't do this, don't do that, don't do that, it's just, that's not going to work either.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
You're not going to hit enough of the don't do's in order to actually help somebody be profitable with their life, because there's always going to be a don't do you missed.
So some of your greatest critics out there will ask a question like this: what gives the two of you the right to claim that you have the authority to deliver the ultimate answer?
I mean,
how do you respond to that?
I respond by saying, well, it's God's answer. It's not mine.
Yeah. You have the authority to deliver the ultimate answer too.
Yeah.
Anyone can.
Right. Yep. That's it. Anybody can, freely given, freely received. Like this, the truth is out there for us to discover. This comes down to, and we talk about it in this season, is discovery versus invention. We didn't invent any of the ultimate answers we're sharing. These are things that were discovered. And there was one of the episodes we talked about Solomon and Ecclesiastes. And this is a Malk podcast gem for y'all.
Yeah.
Can't remember
Oh,
the
yes.
actual episode. They're all a bowl of spaghetti in my brain, right?
Right.
But I do remember Pastor Jonathan asking me, Solomon says nothing new under the sun. And I said, and he's like, well, what's that? You know, we basically went
was
through
that
this
was that the
interpretation.
revelation? Were we talking about like things being
Was it either the
revelatory?
Gnostics,
Gnostics
episode? That's what it was.
I think so. Yep.
And my response was, well, yeah, nothing new under the sun. That doesn't mean nothing new over the sun. Like, he's talking tangible. He's talking on earth. The revelation from God, the truth from God supersedes the earth. It is above the sun. And it was this moment where Jonathan's like, did you learn? I'm like, no, I feel like God just gave that to me now. And but my point is, the point I made in that episode is that doesn't mean I invented this. Just because let's just hypothetically say I'm the first one to have ever said that. That doesn't mean I invented it.
Right? Yeah.
It means I discovered it. And by discovery, it means it had been there all along for anybody to pick up. I just happened upon it. That's what we mean by discovery. It's available for you. And that's what me and Pastor Jonathan get so excited about this and so passionate, because we know that just because we don't understand something doesn't mean that thing's a mystery or a puzzle or something we can't understand. It just means we don't have enough information. Everything is understandable if you have the information. So there's things we don't have all the information on. That doesn't mean those things supersede our finite minds. Our finite minds can handle it. We just don't have all the information. So that's where it's like what gives us the right? The same as anybody could have the right. The same as what gives the person who found the first big gold nugget in California the right to pick it up off the ground and claim it and share it with others.
Oh, that's a good answer.
He found it.
That's a good answer.
It's like we found it. It doesn't mean we're not going to share it. And in fact, it doesn't mean it belongs to us either.
And it doesn't mean that someone else hasn't found it either.
Right.
We just don't know. I guess we haven't done a search on everything online about nothing new under the sun and all of the revelatory points, but someone else could have found it.
Right.
That same point.
And that goes the same with every one of the ultimate answers. There could be other people, other churches, other ministries, other podcasts talking about the exact same topics as us and nailing it. We just don't know. And we've been doing this long enough to see from our experience, the large, high percentage of people aren't teaching and presenting these topics the way we are. But that's not because we're doing anything special. I mean, we are, but we're not doing anything that not everybody could do. This is something anybody has access to. Mm-hmm. What we're presenting is something anyone could do if they were looking at the Word of God and interpreting the Word of God the way we are, the way God has shown us to.
That's great. As if I were to answer this question for you, if I'm standing in the role of defender of these two pastors, what I would say to somebody is, these guys have toiled as laborers to understand what is God's definition for these words. What is God's doctrine? And therefore they apply it through this lens of discipleship. And as they try to replicate themselves into more people, there's more and more revelation. Because as we've listened to all these podcasts, especially season 3, 15 episodes, every single episode, there is just more and more revelation that's coming out of those things because you guys are doing this work.
Yeah. And I'm laughing because I'm sitting here thinking you've seen nothing yet, man.
Awesome. That's so good.
But you're right. And I think one of the things that we've also learned in our walk with God is the more and more when he gives us revelation, when we share it with others, he keeps giving us more. We get blessed the more we help others in so many ways. And I feel like what God's doing is he's doing this with everybody. He's checking to see who's going to allow his spirit to flow with free course? And the people who are letting his spirit flow, he's throwing more anointing at them and more, and like, okay, let's see how much you can handle. Do you want more? But if we're just sitting here collecting it, eventually we're going to fill up ourselves. And if we're not allowing it to flow out to other people, I mean, frankly, I'll say it, God's wasting his time by dumping more on you if you're not going to do something with it. We let it flow out. We help as many people as we can, and God keeps giving us more. And it's like, that's what's happening with these podcasts. The more and more we do it, not only are we learning our process better and better every time we do this, but I believe what we're showing God is because of how we're handling these topics with care and how we're doing it to benefit other people. We're sharing it with the world. He's like, okay, well, I see this as a good investment for me to keep just throwing more truth at you guys, because we keep just receiving it. And you know what? There's honestly, just in this interview, I feel like this interview is very in theme with the episodes that we covered: laborers, doctrine, discipleship. And I think laborers in particular, because there's some things I said in this interview, some things Pastor Jonathan said in this interview where it's like, I'm hearing us say these things and I'm thinking, oh, a lot of people are really going to like this. A lot more people are really going to hate it. And there's some of those episodes. The laborers one in particular was the one where I remember starting the Music Life Church podcast after we were done with the What the Flock podcast. And both Pastor Jonathan and I are just like, I feel like we're going to get in trouble from this one. And we're going to get in trouble. Yeah. There was one line that was said in the What the Flock podcast that we both were synced up over, of like, but these are the things we're showing God. It's tense. Truth is tense. Truth is uncomfortable. Truth makes us tweaky. But we're not going to stop that from shit. We're not going to stop how we feel receiving it or delivering it. We're not going to allow that to stop us from letting that flow through us. And God sees that. And I believe that's what causes God to just give us more. So it's like, you want to, cheat code for being more blessed is focus on helping other people. God will bless you more.
Yeah. And again, that ultimate answer, it confronts us. It's not it's not our answer. It's like what Pastor Joel was saying, which he got from you, Pastor Jake, tweaky. That is a Pastor Jake-ism.
Yeah.
But that truth is tweaky, even to me. The ultimate answer even hurts me. I find myself in these episodes going,
brilliant.
I'm a little bit on the loose side, I'll be honest. I find myself in a lot of those episodes going, oh man, here I am over here towards the loose side.
Or I hear Pastor Jonathan getting to the end of the episode and he's like, okay, finally, what's the ultimate answer, Pastor? Because I went half an hour teaching without saying it. And now I'm thinking, I'm maybe stalling because it's going to be tough to say it. It's tough because we hear ourselves say it and now we're accountable for it because it's in me. I've said it. I know it. And now God can be like, okay, let's see it manifest in your life.
Wow. I feel like, in the course of this interview, God's reminding me even of my own experience in dealing with my own critics. And, this idea of, if these critics were to spend more time on trying to help other people rather than attacking people for helping other people, maybe they'd be getting the revelation. Maybe they'd be getting the ultimate answers that they're attacking other people for getting.
Absolutely. I mean, now you're talking about the story of the Apostle Paul again. I mean, that's his story. The people that are the most juiced to tear people down, like the people that get so upset or want to write on our message board and want to get after it and want to tear us down and bully us, could be I think the most powerful for the kingdom.
Those are usually the people that we're like actually have. Once we can get past the pain, hopefully we're handling the persecution well. These are often the people that when we're discussing what's happening, we're thinking if this person would just get something tweaked in their thought process, they'd be our number one fan, and they'd be the truth's number one fan. They'd be like, watch out. These are the people who they have a lot of energy, a lot of zeal, and they're going to change the world. But it's just, what's the direction you're going? Are you trying to build your own security in yourself because you have a low self-esteem, or are you trying to help people regardless of what it makes you look like? And yeah, Paul was the biggest enemy of the church, and in one moment, with getting his butt kicked on the road to Damascus, he becomes the champion of the church more than anybody.
Yep.
Nothing changed except for the doctrine, right?
Right.
You got a revelation.
That one tweak and they become your biggest fans, but maybe not your biggest fans, because I feel like first and second biggest fans is reserved for Mr. and Mrs. Tater.
Yeah, well, maybe Mrs. Tater and Mr. Tater.
Mrs. and then Mr. Yeah. And that's actually for me one of my favorite moments from the entire series was Mrs. Tater calling in. And Pastor Joel, there was this reference that you made after her phone call about that is the height of spiritual abuse. And I think that's what happens when these critics, misaim, while they might have good intentions, the behavior that's coming out of them is really causing damage, and it's causing hurt in the church and really giving you guys more and more audience every day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do we deal with this height of spiritual abuse?
We share the truth with people, and then we give up control over how they respond to it. If they respond to it well, we keep, hopefully we keep being able to disciple them. And so we love, and then the people who reject us, we forgive, and then we just move on to the next person, knowing that God's going to reward us for the people who have rejected us, and especially for the people who are persecuting us for righteousness' sake. But that's really, and that it's so simple for me to just say that. Love and forgive the people who reject your love. That's it. But it is not easy when people are coming after you, when you're fully convinced that what you're doing is going to change their lives for the better, help them walk closer to God, and help them have an impact on the world, for which will be a net gain. But when you can take a step back and recognize, I learned this from Pastor Jonathan. We look up to Jesus. We do communion every week in our church in remembrance of him being rejected and murdered. In order for his will to happen, for him to die for our sins, he needed to be rejected. You could argue there's way more reward in being rejected than there is in being accepted. And that's one of the things I'm trying to remind myself these times we have a lot of opposition or persecution coming against us, is it's okay. These people are rejecting the truth. This is a lesson a lot of the prophets and judges had to learn too. Samuel had to learn this. Jehovah said, they're rejecting me, not you. And I feel like that kind of put Samuel in this spot of like, oh, okay. Thank you. I can stand back up. I can do what's right. I can still preach the truth to these people. And I can know this isn't personal. And I can show God some empathy too. Be like, I know what it's like to be rejected. They're really rejecting you. But that's it. It really comes down to speaking the truth in love, and then forgiving the people who oppose you.
Yeah. And I would say going through that with someone else, like I get to go through all of this persecution with What the Flock and Music of Life Church podcast with Pastor Joel. We share in all of this together. So that's part of it. When the disciples were beaten, flogged, and they went rejoicing, I don't know if they were immediately happy when they left, or if there was a little bit of like an, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. Are you okay? Like, yeah, that was really scary. That was really hard. And then someone said to someone else, we did it. Like, we did it. We are going through this. We are experiencing what Jesus said. And that, having someone like, could you imagine that, Jake? Like someone grabbing you in the shoulders and saying to you, like, you're doing it. This is the path that Jesus walked. We are doing this together. This is it. I think it just shifts the sadness and the heartbreak and all of it to go, whoa, what's coming? We are going to partake in the glory that is to come. If we partake in that abuse and we handle that well, like Jesus did, then that's the only, and in those moments, and this is cool to be able to talk about this, in the moments when I have been abused for following what it is that I believe God wants me to do, and I'm not attacking, I'm not being a bully, I'm just trying to be nice and caring and sweet, Jonathan, as I present the truth, and then I get abused because of it, or someone, rebukes me because of it, then I go, now I'm assured of my salvation. And I know that sounds crazy, but it's like, it's one of these markers of like, it's so objective, it's so outside myself. I didn't do anything to, I feel like, provoke it or deserve it. And to have that be, to receive that abuse for the sake of what I believe is following Christ, then I feel like, wow, I'm going to partake in his glory as well. I'm partaking in this abuse. So it just gets switched in a hurry. So
yeah, I think of Paul and Silas in jail. It's like, when they're singing hymns, it's like being together probably had a big part of that. And what happens as a result, the chains are falling off and the jailer gets saved, his whole household. But I also think of Job and the crappiness. He could have been in a situation similar to that, but I think his friends failed him. Most of them did. So he felt alone through this, and I don't think he had anybody to come alongside him to actually lift up his thought process and help him handle it the right way. And another thing, what's interesting, I feel like what was just revealed, another thing is the difference between me and Pastor Jonathan. You get these really great questions like this, Pastor Jake, and my answer is very logical, very doctrine based, very the mental side. Like me and Pastor Jonathan make up one really great laborer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I'm the mental side. Because laboring's the mental and emotional, right? And he's the emotional because he's the one. This is not the first time this has happened. That's why I'm seeing a pattern where I give you all the logical reasons why it should be okay to handle this abuse well. And his answer inevitably is going to be something about, we're in this together. We're connected. I'm not alone. I have my fellowship, and that's the emotional connection. And he and I have, it's not that I'm not like that without him, but we definitely make ourselves better. And it's not like he has great doctrine and great mental capacity without me, but together we just sharpen each other so much better. But that's like, this is just the pattern I'm starting to see in all these interviews we've been doing now through all these seasons is, yeah, I give the doctrine answer and Pastor Jonathan's like, and we're doing it together. What's your favorite thing about these podcasts? Well, I really like teaching. It gives me the opportunity. And Jonathan's like, doing it with Joel. Like, we're collaborative. It's fun, like creating. And it's like, there's always a part of me that's like, man, his answer is just way better.
I don't have the answer. And the reason why I was saying this today, we were recording today, and I just said to Joel, like, I love how quick he is to talk and share, and just like he jumps in and he shares and he provides all this understanding, and it gives me time to put my answer together, and it all of that understanding through me comes out in a clear emotional perspective, because without that understanding, it's just a freaking pink mist of like niceness, and it's like, that sucks. That's not doing anything. That's just like happy feels, and it's like, what am I supposed to do with that? But Joel helps provide the truth, and the teachers in my life help give me truth, so that it does actually have a long-term and lasting connection.
That's fantastic. And I feel like it's the embodiment of Jesus sending out the disciples 2 by 2. That's how I see the two of you. It's just this pair that's going out there, that's doing the labor, doing the work. And I believe as a result, I believe people are getting help. I believe that people are experiencing, this restoration of their thought process, they're receiving this right doctrine. And I think it's going to make a lasting impact for years and years to come.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me on Just Hang. I can't wait for season 4 and what's in store for all of us. Hopefully, Rich keeps listening. I'd love to hear the development of what happens with this guy. I think God's doing something with him. I think he's primed for something special. So, guys, keep up the great work. Appreciate all that you do. And until we meet again.
Hey,
This has been
Pastor
another
John.
episode of Just Hang.